on track with it all. So, Dave, you've been a bit busy in the assessment design support team site. It's that's a bit interesting because before you didn't have all those folders, so everyone's got their individual folder now, which is fine. That's all fine. Oh, here we go. So it's still under documents. Rightio. Good, good, good. All right. So
Yeah,
let's just have,
we'd spend a little bit of time just talking about how we're going to move forward. So, for example, we notice there's an archive folder there. We've had a talk about the process of what we're going to do because we know there's going to be a lot of documentation there. So we decided to spend some time up front just to sort of organise it a bit together before we
sure.
got too deep into it. Yeah.
Yep, that's all fine. So can we just go to the PowerPoint just to discuss it, if that's okay?
Yep.
And sorry, I should just start with like your documentation was really impressive. Really impressive. So, yay to you too. In a very short period of time, you've really turned around and put a lot of, I suppose, meat around it all. Like, it's very detailed, so it shows me exactly where you're thinking and what you're sort of considering. So, yeah. So can I say congratulations and
thank you.
And thank you. And thank you for the efforts because I know it was a quick turnaround time, but it really helps me. I mean, sometimes it's hard for me because I'm sort of relying on you guys to do it, and it was a really good to sort of see how you go, and you delivered really well. So thank you.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yep.
Okay, so can I just I'm just looking at the planning, design and development and quality checks, which I think it sort of relates very easily to the one that I did overall. But can I just remind you in the planning, don't forget about the TEXA standards. Remember about higher education? Can we just make sure that goes in there? Yeah, particularly as we look at the Bachelor of Early Childhood, it's probably not an immediate thing that you need to do because what we'll be focused on is ASQA because we'll be looking at the VET qualifications. But I think that's really important. And probably the other thing apart from TEXA is ASQA accredited courses. So when we look at because I know that that's another one that's actually being developed at the moment. So just so that you know, any courses that are developed outside of the training packages, we need to be across how they're actually developed and for you guys just what the assessment requirements are. So for both TEXA and ASQA, there are specifics around that. So if you can just note it, but I'm not, both of those are sort of outside our main business, if that makes sense, but we just need to have that documented. Yep.
Can I ask a quick question? Yep.
Yeah, of course.
Is there a plan of how we have visibility of that? I know it's still developing as we speak, but of the new ASQA compliant courses or ASQA accredited courses, how do we have visibility of that?
Yeah, that's right. So that's why I put in the in our overarching plan, we've got to have the pipeline. We've got to know what's coming so that we can actually get involved with it because at the moment we have, I've got a list from Skills Points and I've got a list from TAFE Digital, but that doesn't really help us all that much. So that's why I'm really keen to work out what is the information flow to us so that we can get ready. So to give you an example, I know that Elise Drew is actually working on she's actually working on an ASQA accredited, well, it's actually an ASQA re-accreditation course. It's one of the Aboriginal languages course. So what I'm sort of thinking with that is so I'm contacting all of the heads of Skills Points just to see where they want us to be, not deployed, but to be involved. So that's why I'm just trying to get a bit of a sense around that. So I'm not sure that we should get involved with that at this point because we've got enough to get focused on. I don't want to, when I talk about those courses, they're really outside the main development. It's just that we need to be aware that they're happening. Yeah, that's all.
Instantly, I know Elise, and I know the Aboriginal language people there. I used to be at Tamworth at one time, and I know Elise well. As we know, the thing around the Aboriginal languages is they're all going to be contextualised to local language, so there's a fair bit of work around that to recontextualise.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that added, I suppose, dimension of complexity that it's ASQA accredited, that in itself is problematic. So, you know,
Yeah.
it's quite a bit. I haven't spoken to Elise yet, but I'll see where we sort of stand with all of that, because as you can see, I'm trying to be selective about the
Yeah.
projects that we get involved in, because it will help us to actually determine how best to utilise what support we actually provide, because I don't want to get to the point where we're trying to be on multiple, you know, different groups and we can't provide any support. It'd be better if we could sort of target what support that we provide. So that's where. But if you can put, Dave, can you bring up that presenting? That would be. I'm looking at it, but it'd be good if you just share it so we can just go through it.
One moment. Yep.
Can I just ask a question with the ASQA accredited? So I understand that we're talking about the same thing. That's basically not the full course, but some elements of it have been accredited by ASQA. Is that what you're saying?
No, it's a full course.
Oh, full course. Okay.
So it's been accredited outside of a training package.
Right. So more like a specific skill or a specific course, or.
Yeah. Look,
Do we have an example?
It'll be sort of custom built. It'll be sort of custom built. So it'll be like a to a course. I'll use that term course, but it'll be custom built somehow to meet our requirements. And they call them unique courses. They're all unique.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, but they have to be something that's not covered in a training package.
Yes.
And, you know, the amount of time and effort that it takes to actually build an ASQA accredited course, you'd have to be very sure that you're actually going to get some return. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or you're meeting a community obligation like this Aboriginal languages.
Yeah. Right, okay.
And then invariably what happens is that ASQA then looks at those courses and then tries to see how that could be assimilated into a training package, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Many of those ASQA accredited courses go that way. If you have a look on, I'm just trying to think now.
So how many would we have of those at the moment?
Oh, we've probably only got 2, 3.
Oh, okay.
Not very many at all.
They're very special.
Yes. No, I had one of those a social media course that didn't quite fit into the marketing and all that, so it was custom built through ASQA, and it was 5 units that were then accredited through that, and then we sort of imported some business units to make a full qual. So I get which one. I just some examples that I could maybe but there's not many, as you said. There's only 2 or 3 of them.
Yeah, that's right. We used to, at one point, TAFE used to be able to accredit their own courses.
Right.
And we had a multitude of courses, and but then that was sort of pulled off as ASQA said, no, that's just out of control, because, I think at one stage we had like about 120 courses, which was, it just wasn't viable. And then ASQA pulled us back, and then that's when we, had a look at, well, what is it that we really want? And it is, if you've gone through the process, you would understand how difficult it is. Yeah. Sorry, David, I'll just finish and then I'll hand it over to you. The other thing to do, Lucia, is if you have a look at training.gov, you can find the courses that are outside of the training packages. You can actually have a look at them, because that's the other thing that we've done is we've actually purchased courses to actually run them. So if they're already ASQA accredited, we actually have a partnership with organisations so that we can run their accredited course, if that makes sense.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Sorry, Dave, go ahead.
No, sorry. Just really briefly, Lucia, what I've found, I've done a fair bit of work in Aboriginal languages and Aboriginal, a whole range of courses. The problem, the ASQA problem, normally is around this thing that Aboriginal people generally, there's a different literacy and a different understanding of literacy, if you like, and ASQA, of course, all about providing evidence of competency, as you know. So the grey area can be between somebody doing, for example, oral type, evidence of, competency. So there's sort of some grey areas there, just by the nature of Aboriginal languages generally being, they're written in English and they're not in English, all that stuff.
Right. Okay, great. Thanks.
Okay. So if we go back to the 90-day plan, if that's okay with everybody. Yep. Just another thing under design and development with supporting business partners. I think it's more than that. We want to establish a business partnering role. So, like I see your roles as actually being the business partners. So it's not actually supporting the business partners, it's actually trying to design and develop the business partnering role. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'd rather. How you know, you are the business partner out of training operations. So how do you sort of work with the regions, and how do you work like within training operations to the skills points? So it's actually designing and developing what that business partnering role is. Yeah, business relationships partnering. Yeah, something like that.
Okay.
Okay, cool. Oops.
Yeah. Yeah, what's that? Like, and we're trying to do that right across all of the groups, but I think that that's really important. Can I just ask about what the infographics are? What you're sort of thinking in that space?
Well, I'm thinking about, the list of people that we'd be working with and drawing on to get things like analytics and, what's working well, areas of improvement, what system capability can be done. And then from that, I suppose they're the key people that we would, and of course the skills points, be looking at from the design and development perspective.
Okay, so
because I know we're designing the templates, but the templates can come in many different formats, and automation, of course, depending on the different types of quals and the levels.
Okay. So just go back to that about developing the templates. I'm not sure that we will have overarching. This is the whole difficulty of these positions, is that I think the templates are going to be developed, but we need to work out how we have input into those templates. So just be a bit mindful of that.
Right.
Yeah. I'm not sure that we'll have like you're the designers, but it's actually assisting people to actually develop the tools. So yeah, it's sort of one removed, if you can think of it in that way. So I suppose I'm still trying to understand the infographics. I sort of got a sense of what you were talking about, but are you thinking that the infographic will show you who you interact with and how you interact and what information will come from those people? Is that what you're sort of trying to get at there?
Well, my interpretation of this, because I think, it's probably, because I know it's a little bit grey at the moment, but I thought it was we would develop the templates, the various templates that can be used with all the guidelines as to, you would use this for blah, 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 and this is what it could do. And I thought possibly have a hand in assisting in populating the templates from an advice. So I don't know if maybe a little bit off here, but not actually writing the assessments as such, because that would be the skills points, but it may be, offering advice. And I'm thinking, in a business plan, obviously there'll be a budget. So how would that course be profitable? Out of 3 assessments, we could maybe, suggest one could be automated, and we could automate it in this particular fashion. That's kind of what I'm thinking. Don't know if I'm on the right track. Just from, kind of what I've done in the past, I'm thinking that maybe this is...
What we intended to do too, Joe, was we're both working on infographics that have probably got way too much detail, but we do intend to drill down then. The idea being, just for example, I'll just show you this just for a second as a bad example, but at least it's what I'm talking about. This, for example, is at the moment, my infographic around RPL, which will probably change, but also I'm trying to do in my head, and I know Lucia's doing the same thing, just figure out what that actually means in the context of steps and people and processes, etc., etc. So we're just at that stage. What we intend to do then, because it's just how we both happen to work. We've discovered yesterday. We both use these visualizations to think about what we're doing, and our intention then is and as we both work that way, we can look at one another's infographics as well and have discussions. The idea being that we'll drill down. Just for example, one of the drilling downs, for example, in the context of assessments is, as you know, in the background, I've been looking at a whole range of tools. For example, there's this tool that Riverina got that creates all this stuff, and there's a whole range of other things. So all we're doing at this stage is just really from our perspective, using these visualizations, because that's how our brains work, to really start to define from that. Our plan is to take the conversations, the information into project documents then. So the next stage for us is, after this visualization process, is now to break that down into, the function. So what's the function? Assessment, for example, and then what's the specific component of that? So that'll be our next stage. So we've sort of, decided this week we just really get our visualizations, because that's how we work together, and then share that, and then from that, the idea is next week then start to build now, if you like, projects is probably a bad word, but across the context of our functions, of assessment, design, compliance, whatever, and start to break that down into a thing. Now, the other component of that, of course, is, and we've only just started it, next week we intend to look at a whole bunch of systems, and as soon as we can, like with that compliance group, start to talk to relevant other teams. But I know we've got to wait until that, until the communication channels are set up. But at least from us, we can now, at least using our visualizations, imagine what it is, who we're going to be talking to, and start to define some of that stuff. I hope that all made sense. That's sort of how we've approached it to this point.
Probably to give you a little bit more of a idea, Joe. I don't know, Dave, if you can pull up that function
Sure.
one.
Yep.
That's kind of what.
Do you want to share your screen? Because I can probably find it, but you probably find it faster. Do you want me to?
Oh, okay. Yep. Okay.
If I'll have a look while we're talking.
So it's in standby. So I suppose in the time, in the last week and a half, I thought that we were producing the guidelines, the framework, and the templates, and offering support in the guts of the assessment, but not writing it. Is that correct? Or has that changed a little bit?
No, it hasn't changed, but I
Okay.
think what you just need to be mindful of is that there are already courses that have been developed, and there's already templates around the assessments. So I think you've just got to think about, it's about designing the assessment. So it's trying to give people a sense of what assessments could be used and how could they be used.
Yes, that's right. And I suppose because Dave and I have spoken about this again, is like, finding out what there is now that works well, instead of reinventing the wheel. So it's more, so in, we've spoken about this in the gathering of the data, is not us saying, okay, we're going to scrap everything and start again, because I'm sure there's stuff that works really well, but maybe there are other things that need to be tweaked and things that just don't work. So it's understanding kind of where that middle ground is, and then working from that.
But the only thing with that is, how are you finding that information out? Because I think that's the other thing that we've got to be a bit careful about, is the way that we gather the information is, obviously we go to our networks first, and I mean, I'm obviously doing that as well, but we just, how do we sort of, remembering that we have a responsibility across TAFE New South Wales, so how do we gather all that information? So I think that's one of the reasons why I'm getting Tracy to do another presentation, about the product catalogue, but also to show us if we can really specifically target that in on the heavy vehicles. How can we actually look at that to give us some realness about it? So if we're sort of given a course, this is the course that we're going to work on. We look obviously at what's already been developed, but then it also gives you a sense of what is your input, what are you going to do with those assessments, and how are you going to determine whether those assessments obviously meet the ASQA standards, but are they meeting the customer's needs, are they meeting business needs, are they innovative, how can we think differently about it?
So I suppose, I don't think there'd be a shortage of data. It's just finding out, mining the best one. So, and I think it's something I sort of mentioned yesterday, that we're probably potentially going to be going to similar sources to pull that type of information out, because when you look at even the content, there should be student feedback. What do they think of the courses? I don't know, as in, is there a rating system here as what you would KPIs for teachers and courses? I don't know if that exists here. So, I mean, there's a whole bunch of, I suppose, metrics that we could, if we had access to, and when you had to read it, and I'm sure, probably Dave could help in this area, that we could probably do a lot of this mining ourselves to find out, and then only have to approach the areas we need to approach when we're a bit stuck.
Yeah.
Organise, I mean, through yourself, Joanne, as you're talking to people, we can sort of maybe say, look, we had a look at these systems and this is the data that we were able to get, but we're missing this and this. And then maybe, okay, this area, we can approach that. I mean, compliance, for example, is, even just from the reports of what's passed, what hasn't passed, what has passed audit reports said, because there'll be some consistency there in where it's falling down. And if it's across a range of different courses, whether be a certificate 3 or 4 and all the rest of it, there should be a very good understanding of where the problem areas are.
And I might just add too, Joe, sort of the stage we're at. So this is only by the nature of the stage we're at. What we've decided to do is just go really big brained, if I use that, just go right out there. It's too much, in fact, but we know that. But the idea being that our process is that next week we start to have more clarity around like the things we're talking about. There's so much, as we know. So all we've allowed ourselves to do at this point, although it looks a bit messy in that context, is really think right out there around everything. Now we're going to align to that 30, 60, 90-day plan, things that are achievable, and so in other words, some more definition. We've done our big thinking over the last week, and our plan is now to start to align that big thinking to, for example, the functions that we're going, that we're responsible for around compliance and assessments and these things. And also the other thing, as you mentioned, this will come up, we've also had conversation about once we have a real project, so the ARU, for example, or whatever it is, our intention is to learn from that and learn actually how we best contribute to the business.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right. So sorry, can you just bring that slide back up, the 30, 60, 90-day plan? Yeah. I think, I suppose I had a different impression of what an infographic was. So I think I suppose it's just a definition. I would have been thinking what you're talking about is a concept map. That's what you're actually...
Probably, but we do intend to make some infographics as well in the context of the discussions we've had, and we haven't done them yet. So one is this mind map, like as you're saying, this concept map idea, which is where we're at, but we do intend to... The more complex thing matters, and I'm just using that term, to make simplified infographics about complex things, if that makes sense. And it's a bit hard to explain exactly, but for example, RPL almost like a process map, if you like, around that. But we both intend to, when we get to that point, we aren't there yet, to these complex ideas around the different elements to make them presented simply. So that's the term infographic we've been.
Okay, so it's not really okay, all right, that's okay, but it's probably just a definition thing, so that's fine. That's
I've sort of been working on something and adding a few bits and pieces in today, and maybe that could evolve into either both or two separate things. So it is coming. We're working on it. I suppose yes, maybe definition of what you'd like to see, because I mean I've come across so many different types of maps and whatnot. So what would you like it to look like?
It doesn't matter to me because it's your map. I was just trying to get a bit of a sense of I suppose just what you saw, what an infographic was. That's all. I'm not questioning.
I'll make one next week.
No. I'm not questioning the idea and what you're doing.
Right. Okay.
When what I would consider an infographic is something where you've got stats and numbers and things like that on it. It actually gives you information. So so I was just looking for some clarity around what you considered an infographic is, and if that's what you consider it, that's fine. What I would consider what you're doing is more mapping concepts and trying to work out. And please, you don't have to change it. This is your plan. It's just for me to understand what you're doing. That's all it is.
Oh no, same with me, because I'm thinking maybe the terminology, maybe it's something else. I just want to clarify. But you're right. At the moment, we are very much into the mapping. So even
that's
with
fine.
things
that's
that I'm doing is mapping, because where we're in the gathering of information stage. We haven't actually gone down to
we just
the
see.
detail and got the stats. And that's the stuff that I would want to get, so to give us a sense of kind of, where it is that we're falling down. I mean, the closest thing that I saw from a statistical point of view was maybe that audit report of where the passes and the fails and kind of which tools were the ones that were not working. The last one from Tracy.
Yeah.
And that gave me a really good overview of, consistently it's the same areas across many different courses.
And I think, obviously, as you would know, Lucia, we do student and employer satisfaction surveys. Every RTO does that, but not every RTO across TAFE New South Wales is likely to share that with us. So that's going to be a little bit problematic. But can I say to you overwhelmingly, and I'll try and get the one from Illawarra. I think I could probably get that one. Overwhelmingly, assessment is always falls down. Whether it's an ASQA audit, whether it's an ISO audit, whether it's the satisfaction surveys that we do, assessment is always the problem. Always. Yeah, absolutely.
I should just say, Joe, too, what we intend to do, we've only been talking about the mapping concept diagrams or whatever we want to call them for now, but what we both intend is we intend to use a lot of digital tools in the context of, we'd set up a Trello account the other day just because we'd already decided we're going to start to use Trello to organise our projects. We're not there yet.
That's fine.
But we're starting that. But we also want to have users guides, if we can use that term, but electronic, interactive, as you've described. That's our intention, and the mapping concept diagrams is just how our brains work. It's a way for us to also visualize how that's going to work as well, because we do want to obviously have guides and support and these types of things. We believe need to be digitally conceived so that they're consumable, as well as your PDF handouts or whatever. I mean, that sort of stuff is we'll probably end up doing as well, but I know there's other units doing that, so that's again part of our investigations now, is finding out who's doing what. I know, for example, TAFE Digital has a whole team around analytics, for example, and they also have another team around accessibility, and so there's a range of people out there doing certain things that we want to interconnect with, and we know we're still probably a month away from that, because we've got to figure out what actually are the communicate channels through your lead, so we know that.
Yeah, absolutely, and that it's. I think at the moment it's a bit slow and steady, but all of a sudden it's all going to happen. So I think this time it's really useful for the thinking that you're doing. I think that's really good. So can I just ask, now you've sort of the tools, and that's design and develop tools for different delivery modes. I get that's assessment tools, in my side. Yep. So when we come over into quality checks and you start talking about testing and trialing the tool and implementation of the tool, is that all the same thing, or are you talking something differently there?
Well, you go first. Sorry,
in testing and trialing the tool.
So are we talking tool, or are we still talking tools with a plural?
Oh well, tools, I suppose, is the different types of assessments. I mean, it's assessment, the entire assessment tool. But within that tool, there's a different number of types of individual assessments. So that's probably,
So I just wanted to get a sense that that's what you're thinking. So you're sort of thinking overarching. There's an assessment tool that has all the different tools combined in there. Yes.
Correct. And that would also include things like marking guides, mapping documents, instructions, everything that goes with that actual final product, or the bits and pieces.
And what we're looking at, there are a number of tools, electronic tools, for example, that do that sort of stuff that we've been investigating. We're going to have a closer look at them next week, for example. Is one definition of the tools. So the idea is that, and I've got to visualize this as well, but as an idea that there's a unit X in TGA, and there's a number of assessment events, and those assessment events, the assessment tool looks at, and I'm going to call it, generic is a bad word, but what's the word, modular assessment event, I'll call it, and I'm going to visualize all this, but then has a context which might be face-to-face or whatever. There's all these variables. So at a high level, we're conceptualizing what does it mean to have Unit X in TGA, assessment event 1 of that unit, and then all the context of that. So we haven't got there yet, but the idea is that there'll be visualizations, information, tools, electronic tools, whatever, and a variety of stuff that we're still working through that enables that is the support tool to, besides us, is a support electronic interactive, I'll use those terms, tool to help the designers, if that made sense. And I haven't got any of that on diagrams or anything yet, but that's sort of how we've been conceptualizing it. We've got to get to the point now of doing all the investigations. We're still probably a month away, to be honest, of looking at everything that's available and talking to the right people.
Yeah, so Dave, it is a 90-day plan. Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
It's fine. So yeah, think of it that way.
Yep.
Can I just I've just sort of been looking through your work plan as well, and is there anywhere where you're actually looking at the current templates that are coming out of compliance? Are you looking at those as well?
No, so that's part of the gathering information. But
Okay.
Now,
Yeah.
from what you just said before, I was just thinking that is that where you know, the stuff that I think would be useful to us, from what you're saying, is that some of that is not really public. So there could be issues in getting that information.
So there's two things there. It's the if you have a look on excuse me, on the internet, this is the feedback that's currently coming out around what's been put together from the compliance team, is that although it's probably ASQA compliant, it's really over the top. So I think you need to have a good look at that, so that you know when an assessment tool is actually developed, how it sort of sits in all of those larger documents. I think that's really important to have a look at. So just on the internet page, there's a whole lot of, I suppose, templates that you need to be aware of.
Yep.
Yeah.
So Joe, just so you know, I have been looking at that stuff as well as the electronic tools. There's a variety of them. This one's from Illawarra, we're Southern Region. This is TAFE Digital, like a document generator tool. There's another one New England. There's another one North Coast. So I've been looking at that stuff just because I have the history of this stuff. I'm also looking at the Skills Point standard. I went out and met with them and had a look at their documentation. So what I'm doing in the background, and we actually intended next week, didn't we, Lucia, to start to look at the sort of stuff that I've been doing in the background, to actually bringing that to both our attention next week. And so we get a snapshot, if you like, of what's sort of out there that we know about. There'll be other things we don't know about, obviously. But that will get attention next week.
Yeah, and remember that Alison starts next week too. So
cool. That's cool.
Yeah. So
cool.
Yeah. So just have a think about how you're going to bring her up to speed with all of this as well. So
we've actually got a folder for her, haven't we? We've actually created her own little folder.
and of course, one of the things with Alison too is that she'll, because she's come from the compliance area from Hunter, she will probably be able to access the satisfaction surveys for Hunter as well. So
we're really looking at only, I mean, we can't, for what you're saying, get a satisfaction overall across the board. We're really only looking at particular regions, which kind of give us an idea, but it's not really across the board.
Well, just remember that we're still 10 RTOs, yeah?
Yeah. And within those 10, I mean, there aren't like, maybe reports on each of them, or? There
would be, but whether or not we can access that.
Yeah, that's a problem. See, the politics.
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. It's a lot of the information that that I think would assist us is really not publicly available. When I say publicly available, is that we cannot access it. So it's almost we can pick and choose. And
look, I can reach out to people, but it's always the thing about this information is about how the information will be used, and people, I suppose, have been burnt in the past when they've shared this sort of information, if you get what I'm saying, and then it becomes this whole sort of
very sensitive. Yes, yeah,
it does. But I could certainly ask. I think the last conversation I had was that Brenda Cleaver, who's the General Manager of Standards and Compliance, she's actually gathering all the information. It's just whether or not I can get access to it, that's all. But, invariably, as I said, I'll get the Illawarra one. I'm pretty sure I could get that one. But invariably what happens, Lucia, it's the over-assessment, it's not the right AQF level.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
They're probably the two bigger ones that we have this tendency of over-assessment and not at the right AQF level. They're always the two big ones that we have.
Okay.
So Joe, as you know, I tried to reach out to Brenda, and I realised that we don't have the official capacity to do that
Yep.
yet. But as you know, I tried that because this was part of our baseline, information gathering. Do you think would it be possible in the next weeks? I don't know, whatever that means, whatever that might mean, to
So
arrange that contact or not? Because we don't stop all over. I realise we don't be like balls in China shops and all that.
Peter and I are meeting with Brenda next Friday on the 4th.
Okay, cool.
Because it would be useful then for the entire unit here to get that information. And we don't need to know names. We just need to know across the board.
That's right. It's confidential. Obviously, it's
when
confidential.
it comes to resources, this is blah, 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 and assessments, blah, blah, blah. We don't need to know regions. We don't need to know areas. We just need to know,
just basic data.
Where the sticking points are really. Yeah.
Yeah, look, Lucia, I know, I understand it, absolutely, but it's probably, when we become one RTO, it won't be as much of an issue.
Yeah.
But
Sure.
the other thing to suggest to you too is don't forget to go to NCVER, because they've got all of the results of VET in its entirety, and you will see really we're not all that different from anybody else. So if you go there and have a look at it, the last report it brought up a whole lot of things around assessment too again. So maybe that will be useful. But just to let you know that I am going to this meeting next week. So I will try and tack something else on with Brenda about that. So I think at the moment they're trying to work out how they sort of operate as well. But I think, again, as you saw from the response that Brenda gave you, Dave, they're a bit, they're just keeping a lot of the information to themselves at the moment. And we've got to try and establish how we sort of interact with that. And, thankfully, Peter's sort of responded and we've got this meeting. So
great.
So there's only myself and Simon and Peter going to a meeting with Brenda. So it gives me an opportunity to bring this up. So if there's anything that you want me to bring up, just put it all in an email, and I've got the meeting next Friday on the 4th.
Okay, we'll talk about that then. Thank you. That's really
maybe we can put some questions together, and if we can get the answers or the information, great. If we can't, well, at least we tried.
Yeah.
Joe, I've got a question too, just really brief one. Sure. This is the 90-day plan, but as we're talking about one TAFE, and so operationally that's where we are, but it's pretty obvious that by the end of this year and starting next year we will be in a different position. How much energy do you want us to expend on what's the ratio you feel between operationally where we're at now and our current role, and what's going to happen potentially next year with the one TAFE? Because we'll be in does that make sense what I'm asking?
Absolutely. And we know that there's going to be some significant changes. And I suppose that's why we need to be flexible in our approach to this. So basically we have to work in the here and now with the intent that we know that a change is going to happen. So if we think about going to one RTO, just say that happened, we know that we're working towards that. That's why we're having these there's products that are going to be statewide. So we are working towards it, but we need to, there's also BAU that has to happen right now as well. Yeah. So I think at the moment, that's probably in a roundabout way, but to probably be to the point, the 90-day plan is really about what are we going to do between now and the end of June, and that's to get us all up to speed, have a bit of a test out there so that then we can develop the framework and develop our 12-month plan. Yeah. And hopefully by the end of June, we'll have more of a sense of the timeframes of, say, SMS, the one RTO, the implementation of the standardised products from next year. So we know what the big ticket items are, and the plan is obviously the beginning of next year. So when we do our work plan for the next 12 months, I see that will be the difference. Like we might, between June to December, will be probably different from what we do from January to June. Yeah.
Sure. Yep. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I hope there's no definitive answer to that.
No, it's a bit contentious to ask it, but I just thought, that's made it clearer. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think the projects are really going to help. I think they're going to really assist us to actually work out just to test a few ideas. I mean, this
Yeah.
is really good. What you're doing is, you're trying to really get a sense of where we are right now and what's happening. With the intent, we know what's being worked on, but then we also know that we have to be flexible enough to know that changes are going to come into play.
Yeah.
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 Okay. So I was just having, so that's all good. The plan's all good. I was just having a look at your work plan, and I think that that's really. I think that was the only thing I just wasn't clear about, the infographics. That's all, and that's only a terminology thing, so I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
So what?
Yes.
Just really
So
quickly,
that's still coming.
yeah.
And that's, I'm fine with that. I just wanted to have an understanding of what we're actually developing. And I suppose if you can keep in mind too, I had a discussion with Joni and Marcus about this, is, again, we know we want to make it interactive and we want to have supporting, resources available, but it's like, how do we sort of make it that people will use it? Just because I often think that people don't look for resources until they need them. So we can have this.
We have to build it into a digital workflow, whatever that means. And I know there's lots of work being done on it. But for example, with this example here, just for example, this is just a simple thing that pulls TGA data and generates Word documents. But there's other digital workflows being worked on that do that much better, including EBS data and a whole range of other things. So that our design. So the way we get to work is our design. The interactive components can be built into those digital workflows at the appropriate place, if that made sense. And I've done some brief mapping of that because there's a whole bunch of work going on with TAFE Digital, IT, ICT, and some other people around some digital processes around assessment design and other things as well. So is that making sense? So if we can figure out what it is we can add value at what point of what process of assessments, then our digital components can then be electronically added to the workflow of those components. If that all made sense. I know it sounds a bit vague, but it's all stuff that's coming with SMS and other stuff in the near future.
Yep. And that's really good, Dave. Yeah, I agree with that absolutely. The only other thing that I'd ask you to sort of think about is, within the process, how are we going to monitor? I mean, I know that you've got in Objective 6 about review and monitor assessments, and it's about the continuous improvement of it. How do we sort of contribute to that without crossing over into the compliance area? So when I say that, it's not about whether the assessments are compliant, because, hopefully, if the process works, they should be compliant. But how are we going to ensure about the consistency? And I think that's probably something, if I can get you to sort of think about, is how are we going to ensure that the consistency is being met for the AQF levels, for the different delivery modes, for all of the courses? And I think that is a challenge in itself. If I can just ask you to consider that somewhere along the track.
We certainly had brief discussions about it, and I've been considering it in the context of, that was part of the reason I wanted to meet the compliance team to see what they're doing, especially in the context of evidence that students hand in. So we do all of our pre-assessment validation, all that stuff, and then students hand us back evidence, and then what real data can we get and what evidence can we get from that real evidence that they've submitted back for their assessment events, and then map back to AQF and all that, the levels and all that. So in other words, the final student evidence that comes back, the physical evidence, the real stuff, we ideally need to be in a position where we don't have to know student's name or whatever, but just the data around that and how closely we're aligning to AQF and all that stuff. So that's just like a brain dump of it, and we've had some discussions about it, but how we actually we need to know more things.
Yeah. So just remember that I suppose we're probably fairly aligned with the compliance team, because, as they've alluded to, their role is to provide the resources, monitor it, and provide feedback. But they're going to be probably removed from the actual process and working with teachers, as we will as well. We probably won't be engaging directly with teachers. I'm not sure. I've still got to try and work out how we do that, but it's really up to the region to engage with the teachers and that whole delivery, implementation and performance team. So it's about us trying to think, okay, if that's how do we influence the people that are actually directly working with that area, like working with teachers, working with students, because we probably won't, I mean, we might get involved in some sort of project work, we might get involved in some sort of focused group discussion, but to sort of think that we'll be involved at that for, you know, courses and how that whole sort of continuous improvement process works, I'm not really sure that we're going to be actually involved directly with that.
Yeah, I mean, from my point of view, I was thinking that as this is a new thing, a new tool, and we're sort of working on pretty much standardizing and using the new, when it comes to the post validations and evaluation, which are normally done about 6 months after, you know, students have gone through and whatnot, and whatever the processes and procedures are here, that align to, you know, the compliance and what they do, their process is not so much about actually having to be involved, but it wouldn't be a bad idea for the first one to actually be part of that post-val or that moderation, because in the moderation is very much about seeing if the evidence, you know, is consistent and valid, yes, and all the rest, and they both of them kind of bring different things. Now, I'm sure that there are reports that they have to submit, whether it be from the skills or the teachers, and then they send it to the skills, and the skills send it to compliance. So again, it's about the information that comes out of those reports. What is the information that's coming out once that tool that's never been trialled before has been trialled, and what the outcome of that is. So I'm seeing this process that could potentially be, you know, a 12-month process where, you know, because again, you know, if the tool hasn't had students go through it and there's no 6 months, at least 6 months of students go through it, there wouldn't be enough data to be able to make any continuous improvement down the track. And so that's kind of what I'm seeing that to be. And again, it doesn't have to be a physical body, but even just for the first ones, I think it needs to be really visibly tested, so that we have a really good sense, because that's where we can then come back and say, okay, well, this didn't really work, and we can make reasonable adjustment and change the templates for the future, or look at different ways that it can be used, or maybe that's a good area for training of teachers.
And another angle we looked at, Joe, and I was waiting again until we make the communication channels, but Lucia and I talked about Greg Higgins' analytical team with TAFE Digital. They're building a data warehouse, which will gather definitely from TAFE Digital perspective student outcomes in the context we're talking about. But that same team is working with EBS. They intend to do data work with the student management system, etc. So they've got a range of capability that, when the time's appropriate, we intended this particular item to engage with those guys and just see where we might have some crossover, where we might be able to get some data, for example, from their data warehouse, etc. So that was part of our intention as well when we get. It's Objective 6 now, because we do see it a bit further down the track, because there's still stuff being built and teams being built and all that, and we also need time for students to, as Lucia pointed out, you know, to actually use the assessment, you know, events, and you need that data to be able to do an analysis. So that's sort of our strategic thinking about it. We haven't actually enacted anything yet besides having discussions around it.
So I think I'd be trying to document what it is, what information do you need, and where you think you can get that information from.
That was our next task. What we intend to do next week was pull this apart. Now, this is our master copy. Yep. And what we're starting on next week, we've broken it down to, Lucia thought of this, and it's a great idea, just to break it down into functions. So we've got gathering information, etc. But what we intend to do now is, and that's why I was glad to see your project document this morning, really now break this down into, we're going to have a range. We were talking yesterday about how, not to split it up because we're going to work together, but you know, which one is to focus on what, because all this now becomes sort of sub-projects, if you like, of the main function. So that's where we're at now. We're going to start that process next week, and that's why we were just going to finish off this week because our brains work that way, our visualizations or our mapping, what do we call it, mapping design.
Oh no, I like the visualizations. I'm fine with that. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's Yeah.
So that's going to break down now to these more, the objectives, if you like. We're going to define more of the objectives. What are we really talking about, and who are the people we need to talk to that we can already imagine, but it might change. But at least it's a starting point when we have and then we'll be able to give you a clear view of who we think we need to talk to and what we need to talk to them about. That's our next objective.
Well,
So
and that's why I need the communication plan. That's why, we've started to talk about that and how that works.
Yeah.
So I did put have started on the communication plan. So I have actually gone
that's
through
right.
and did a lot of stuff on that yesterday. So I'm just waiting for Dave to put his input, and I've actually got, I think, fairly specific questions in there.
Where is that, by the way, sorry? Where is that?
In the drafts.
Drafts. Oh, yeah.
Drafts ADS team. So in there is a communication plan.
There it is. Okay.
At the top,
bring it up.
That I've been populating with, more specific questions around the product, around the development, and around the support, kind of what we need. And from that, I suppose we could even drill down even further and go back, because that was what I was looking at, is what's the name of the team, and from the
I start to populate
listing.
different names, for example. I know some people in these different units.
Yeah, so that's probably where Dave would be able to come in better than I as to who it could be.
Oh, well, and what I'm sort of
yourself? Yeah.
No. I'm just sort of hoping that we all, I'm hoping that each of the teams pull this together, and I know that Caitlin and Kim are doing the same. So, so I think between the two areas, I think that will be good.
Yeah.
Now, look,
it's probably worthwhile for us all to collaborate, because we could be potentially asking the same questions to a certain thing.
But what I wanted you to do is to think about it from the team perspective, and then we'll bring it together into one.
Yes.
That's exactly right. Yep.
Yeah. So this is from our team, as in our role, and what we're doing for assessment, what I'd be looking for, and the kind of questions I'd be asking. And I said, as I'm thinking, going through, so I have thrown a few things in there. And then again, it's, can we fine tune it even more? I'm sure we can, and drill deep down. And there could be like a bunch of different things that we could ask different sections. And then before we approach, I think, so that they're not bombarded by 3 different teams, that's probably where we should all come together and decide, and maybe we split it up,
But that's the intent, that I wanted you to all go and think about that, and then we'll bring it all back together again. So I suppose, can you send this out, Lucia? Can you send the link out and just say this is what we're thinking of?
Okay.
And maybe start the conversation with the other teams?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
If that's okay.
Yeah. No problem.
I've got to go because I've got to go to another meeting. So thanks for your time.
That's all right.
Thank you, Jack.
It went a bit longer than I thought. I hope that's okay, but
No.
I think we're just had to have that conversation.
That's
That
good.
was good, just to make sure that we're still on the right track. That's always good. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think what we might do is we might have another meeting Thursday afternoon next week to just nut out the communication plan. Yep. Okay.
Yeah, that would be good. And there's probably a few other documents in the folder if you get a chance to have a look that we're sort of, Dave and I, are working on, and that might give you a bigger perspective. So maybe, it could be a good idea to sort of maybe show you all the things that we're sort of working on, or maybe we could put it in, I don't know, in an email maybe, to sort of understand the flow and our thinking. Would that help?
No, I suppose at this point I'm happy with the high level documents that you're working on.
Okay.
I think that I can go in and have a look, which I have. So that's all good. I think at the moment, everyone's got their 90-day plan, which is good. We've put that up into one. Now everyone's working on their communication plan. We'll bring that up into one. And then I think, it's really working on the projects and then trying to get all of our lessons learnt from those, so that then that informs what we're actually trying to achieve by the end of the 90 days, which will then work into the product development support framework. So I think it's all sort of coming together. I hope, if you guys don't think it is, you need to let me know, won't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think it is. From my point, I think, Dave as well. So I'm speaking on your behalf, but I think from our conversations, I feel that we're kind of going in the right direction. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it is coming together. So,
I think it really is. It's a shame that we don't have like our cultural customisation officer and our inherent requirements officer. And I think the product designers, they're probably a little bit different, but I think, I'm sort of thinking that the assessment designers and the implementation coordinators do come together quite a lot, and that's where I think I'll probably be. That's where you two teams need to work together, because the communication plan is really between you two, not so much the designer, the product offering designers. It's sort of a little bit different.
That's right. We need to not be flaming people as well. We need to have a coordinated approach between our two teams to the developers as the development, so we don't flame people.
Well, and guess who I'm meeting with now at 11?
The implementation team.
That's right.
Team.
Okay.
Tell me g'day. G'day from the AD team.
All right. Thanks a lot, guys. Thanks.
Great.
For your work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Take care.
Bye.
See you, Dave. Bye.